Here in Virginia, we've got Governor Terry McAuliffe, who vetoed pro-gun legislation. We came up a little short in the legislative override session, unfortunately. And it looks like gun control, I think, is going to be a big issue in the Virginia elections this year. Dave Adams, legislative director for the Virginia Shooting Sports Association, is with us on the program. Dave, good afternoon, sir.
Hey, Cam. How are you doing today?
I am fantastic. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great.
Excellent. All right, so we've got this new poll. It's by Quinnipiac in Virginia. And a couple of interesting things. So according to Quinnipiac, Dave, Virginians, apparently you and I are the only ones who don't want universal background checks. That's it.
Apparently that's correct.
Which is weird because I know a lot of other people in Virginia who are not on board with this.
Well, you know, when I see polls and they talk about universal background checks, first thing I want to know is the exact question they ask. And so when I went to the crosstabs and saw the question, it's a one-line question: do you support background checks for all gun buyers? There's no context given. There's no background given as to what the current law is. And so if you were to walk up to anyone, whether they be a gun owner or a non-gun owner, they're probably going to tell you, yeah, I think background checks are a good idea. But when you dig in to what those actual proposals would be if they were to become law, like we saw in Nevada during the election, or like we saw in Maine during the past election, you know, your numbers start coming a lot lower than 90-some%.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, this is not a specific legislative proposal. This is a one-line question. When voters actually get to look at the details here, because, and frankly, it's interesting, Dave, that the question would be, do you want to see background checks on all gun sales? Because that's not the proposal. The proposal, I think a better one-line question would be, do you want to see the private transfers of firearms, even temporary transfers between friends, criminalized in the state of Virginia? I'd love to see what that question, what the results were for that question.
Yeah, that's a good point, because whenever you see legislative proposals or you see referendum proposals, it's never about purchasing. It's always about transfer. And a transfer is me handing the gun to my wife at the range, or to my daughter at the range, or my friend that I've known for 20 years at the range. That's a transfer. That's not a purchase.
No, and this is one of the reasons why, you mentioned Nevada and you mentioned Maine, but we also saw in New Mexico this past legislative session, Bloomberg spent a lot of money in the elections in November. He thought that he had an anti-gun state senate in place, and as it turns out, their background check bill couldn't get out of committee. There was so much opposition from grassroots gun owners across the state of New Mexico, but also from the county sheriffs. They had unanimous opposition from county sheriffs explaining, look, this is unenforceable. You had the widow of a Albuquerque police officer who had been murdered in the line of duty. Her husband's death was sort of used as an example by these gun control advocates of, well, this is why we need this law. She came out and spoke out publicly and said, my husband would not have supported this law. I don't support this law. This is aiming in the wrong direction. Let me tell you what we're doing with repeat violent offenders in this state. You want to get serious about violent crime? Great. This isn't the way to do it.
You're exactly right. And, in every state that Bloomberg has tried to push this initiative, sheriffs and law enforcement have been overwhelmingly opposed to it because they know what stops crime, and generally it's not a background check.
No, it is not. It's also not one gun a month. This poll also found voter support 62 to 32%. A Virginia law repealed in 2012 that limited a person to only buying one handgun per month, as opposed to current law, which has no limit on handgun purchases. That, too, not exactly what the law was. If you had a concealed carry license, you were exempt from the one gun per month law. And more importantly, Dave, I mean, what's happened in Virginia since the repeal of one gun a month? Has our crime rate skyrocketed in Virginia?
I think it's at decade lows.
Pretty close to it. I think you're right about that. But, look, the Quinnipiac poll says voters in Virginia, 54 or 41% support, quote, stricter gun laws in the state. That tells me, Dave, regardless of what the actual numbers are, and regardless of what voters really think as they learn more about these issues, look, that's just too tempting a figure for anti-gun politicians and for anti-gun activists in Virginia. They're going to make gun control an election year issue here.
Yeah, I think you've already seen it with one candidate on the Democratic side who has flip-flopped. When he was a congressman, he was good on the issue, and now he has basically flipped and said no, he thinks that he was wrong back in those days, and he supports all the different proposals that are being thrown out now.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that it won't be long before the lieutenant governor tries to out anti-gun Tom Perriello as well there. And I'm curious to see how this will play out, frankly, not just in, Northern Virginia, where, again, I would expect to see a lot of anti-gun Democrats running for local office, but I'm curious to see how this plays out in rural Virginia. Are we going to see the same anti-gun mentality foisted on or foisted on the public by these Democrat candidates in rural parts of the state, or is this going to be a Richmond, Northern Virginia, Norfolk phenomena this year?
It's probably going to be the latter, and I find it interesting that Perriello, who is a candidate who has done a 180 on the issue, he is trying to make inroads in rural Virginia at the same time that he's out there saying that he supports all of the various gun control proposals that McAuliffe has put out.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough sell, I think, for a lot of rural Virginians. But again, gun owners in Virginia, we cannot be lackadaisical this year. We've got off-year elections, and Dave, Michael Bloomberg, every time we've got state elections in Virginia, he opens up his wallet, he starts handing out money down here. He spends in Virginia races because he thinks that this is one of those states that he can flip and that he can turn our legislative body from a body that generally passes pro-Second Amendment legislation to a body that will pass whatever gun control he wants.
I fully expect him to drop millions into Virginia. If he did $3 million on 2 Senate races 2 years ago, I can only imagine how much he wants to drop into statewide elections. So Virginia gun owners need to be active, get involved in the campaigns of the pro-gun legislators, not only at the House of Delegates level, but at the statewide level. And then go to myvssa.org and join VSSA if you're not a member, because we need everybody out there to do their part this year.
Absolutely. Dave, listen, thank you so much for your time. It is always good talking with you today.
All right, Cam, and do me a favor, say congratulations to those young ladies from Iowa when you speak to them. I saw them at the NRA annual meeting last year, and those are some sharp young ladies. I think they got a future in campaigns if they want it in the future.
I think you're right, and I will certainly pass on your good wishes. Dave, thanks again, sir.
Thanks again, Cam. See you in Atlanta in 2 weeks.
We will see you soon. Dave Adams joined us, Legislative Director for the Virginia Shooting Sports Association.